We're going to talk about the commercial revolution. Commercial revolution are changes that are happening in businesses that are all a result of colonization. Okay, so how does the world economy or businesses change? Okay, first thing we need to talk about is the Columbian Exchange. This was a huge deal because once Europeans start interacting with the Americas, there's going to be this huge exchange of new goods. Okay, so think about the New World. The New World is the Americas. It is the New World because it is new to the Europeans. Whereas the Old World is Europe, Africa, and Asia because Europeans already knew that existed. And there's going to be an exchange of goods. There's a lot of things that Europeans brought to the Americas, like tea and coffee. These are going to be major cash crops that are going to be sold. Diseases, which are going to kill off a large percentage of the Native Americans. Livestock, okay, things like cows and sheep and pigs and goats, okay, horses. These things are going to be brought to the Americas. They did not exist there before. The livestock are going to have somewhat of a devastating effect. Cattle are sometimes trample in large herds will trample good farmland. Pigs eat so much. Native Americans had never had to deal with pigs that eat and breed so quickly. They didn't have fences for their crops, and so pigs that were just released in the wild by Europeans would breed and multiply, and then they would eat all the Native American crops. Okay. You also have things like sugarcane. This is going to become another big cash crop. And then some fruit, some other stuff, some other food stocks that Europeans brought with them. The Europeans are also going to find stuff in the Americas that is very important to them too. One of the biggest things is tobacco. Okay, they started smoking tobacco with natives. They brought that back to Europe. People loved it, and they continue to do that. And this is going to become a big cash crop. They also are going to find silver. Some of the largest silver deposits at this time are coming from the Americas, like Potosi is a huge Spanish silver mine that most of the world's silver is going to come from. Okay? Also things like potatoes are really important. So potatoes are going to stave off, or they're going to keep famines from happening because they're really hardy sources of food. They're easy to grow, and so they're less likely to have a famine. Tomatoes, we think about like Italian food, pizza, pasta, all having like tomato-based sauces. None of those things actually existed before the Columbian Exchange, where you had tomatoes making it to Europe. Okay. So the Columbian Exchange is these new goods that had been found. And the next is the triangular trade. So in triangular trade, you also have a system of ways that the Europeans would trade their goods. So in Europe, they would produce goods like guns or pots or clothes. And they would take these manufactured goods to Africa. And in Africa, they would trade those things for slaves. Okay? And so the merchants would trade these for slaves, and then they'd get the slaves and take them to the Americas so they could sell those as forced labor to work on plantations growing cash crops. And then from the Americas, they would take those the raw materials that the slaves were growing, sugarcane, tobacco, cotton, and they would take those raw materials back to Europe where they would start to produce things. Okay? Now, in reality, it was a little bit more complicated than that. Things were going all over the place. And so in reality, it looks a little bit more complicated, but we also want to just kind of think of this simplified from, just manufactured goods, slaves, and then raw materials being transferred. Okay? Now, Europeans, while they were trading like this, they wanted to create what's called a favorable balance of trade for their country. So say Britain, for example, if they wanted to create a favorable balance of trade, they have to export or sell more than they buy. Okay? So in order to do that, they have to make sure, one, that people aren't buying too much, right? They're not importing too much. And if they do buy a lot, they have to make sure they're exporting more and more. And so another way to do this is to export expensive manufactured goods, which they were doing, and importing cheap raw materials. So both of these are ways to get a favorable balance trade. Basically, if you're selling more than you're buying, you are making money, you're getting richer. And that's what European countries wanted to do. And so This is going to result in something called mercantilism. Mercantilism is when the government strictly controls the economy. They control all aspects of trade, all merchant activity, and they're going to make sure their merchants are following their rules so that they have that favorable balance of trade. So you only allow colonies to trade certain goods, right? You're only going to allow them to trade with the mother country, that European country. Okay? You do not allow colonies to trade with any other country. So your colony, if you're a British colony, you can't go trade with France. Okay? So here you can kind of see this cartoon kind of showing some of the rules that a country like Great Britain had in their mercantilist policies. This is called the Navigation Acts, but it's enforcing mercantilism, right? So here we see it says don't export any hats, woolens, or iron, since these things are already made in England. That would compete with English goods, so they're not going to allow them to make those things. Here it says you can't import anything except in English colonial ships. That way the English ships are the ones making the money. Okay? It says send that tobacco to England because England would buy that tobacco and then sell it for more than they're buying it for. Okay? Here it says take that cargo to England to be taxed, making sure that England is getting the tax. So the mother country is always trying to get that favorable balance of trade. Another way to think about this, okay, besides just mercantilism, is that favorable balance trade. Some of the rules they might say is like, all right, if we're going to export 3 barrels of rum bought at $10 a piece, that's going to mean that they're importing, okay, they are buying $30 worth of goods. So how many sacks of potatoes at $5 each do they need to export? How many do they need to sell? Okay, well, you need to sell at least 6, hopefully more than that, so that you can import or export more than you import. Okay. So talking about the Columbia Exchange, one of the things that started to change the way businesses are run is silver. Okay, the Europeans, especially the Spanish, were getting so much silver that they became very wealthy. Their navy was funded. Their navy was funded by the silver that they were getting from their American mines. Okay? And this is going to become the global currency. It's also going to make Europeans very rich. Okay, so Europeans are going to gain a lot of wealth. Their styles are going to start to change. Europeans start to dress different. But overall, Europeans are moving from like one of the least advanced, wealthy, prosperous areas of the world to one of the most advanced because of colonization, because of the commercial revolution. Another way that Europeans are getting wealth besides strictly just taking materials is something called a joint stock company. Now we talked about this when we talked about exploration, that Europeans a lot of times to create a exploration, they would get a charter from a king. So the king would give them money and in return they would give the king a portion of their profits back. Well, now they're going to take this same idea, now that Europeans are gaining more wealth, now it's not just the king who has the money to invest in businesses, now people do. And so this is going to allow joint stock companies to create. Instead of a king investing in the business, now different Europeans, a whole bunch of Europeans are going to invest in the merchant activity, a business that would go buy and trade and sell stuff. And in return, that business is going to give them a portion of the profits back. So this is going to help them make money. Okay. Now, a joint stock company is the whole idea that you're selling stock. So these people that invest in the business are actually partial owners of that business. So any money that that business makes, they get a portion of it. Okay? And one of the things that was really good about this joint stock company is that it allows Europeans to reduce their risk. Because if this person invested all their money in this business, right, and say all their ships were sunk or pirates stole the ship, then they're going to lose all of their money. So what Europeans would do...
Miss Afron, can you please call the main office? Miss Afron, please call the main office.
So what Europeans would do is they would take their money and they would invest it in multiple businesses. That way, if one of these ships gets sunk, right, or if one of these businesses goes out of business or is attacked by pirates or they're not profitable, then this person is still investing in 2 other businesses. So it reduces the risk of loss, right? You're still going to make some profit on some of the businesses. And so joint stock companies are going to help Europeans make a lot of money, not just the king, but a lot of other Europeans too. It's going to help them be able to get wealthy. Okay? So that is the commercial revolution. It is in general going to make Europeans much more wealthy, much more advanced, much more powerful.